We are live on the internet.
Yay! All
You
right, let
must
me see
be
here.
coming through your
Oh, let me change it. Let me
headset.
change it. 1 second. Audio
Boop,
and video
boop, boop.
settings. Built-in microphone. ATR USB microphone. There we go.
Oh, baby.
Ooh, baby. Oh, is that better?
Sounds crisp.
Crisp. Crispins. Okay.
Show
Episode
reactions.
63, you said?
Yeah. Turn subtitles on. What is that American saying?
Exactly.
Turning subtitles on. We are live. YouTube.
All right. Should we start recording?
Yes.
Okay. In 3, 2, 1, record.
Hey, I'm Michael Dorinda.
And I'm Jake Bennett.
And welcome to episode 63 of the North Meets South web podcast.
Web podcast. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Once again, we have no idea what we're going to talk about, but that's fine because we've got lots of stuff going on in our day-to-days that is probably worth mentioning. So, yeah, let's see.
It's a mystery.
Should we start with, I have a couple ideas. I have a few ideas.
We've always got ideas.
3.
We always make stuff up as we go along, and it always seems to work out.
I can start if you want. I can talk about this cool thing we've been doing. Cool. Okay. So Sentry is what we use for air tracking right now. I'm so sorry, Frank and Marcel. Apologize. At some point we may switch. Who knows, right?
It's just like one of those things. For them, don't you think? Getting people that are, well, people like you and I, well, just people in general that are so deeply entrenched and using Sentry across all of their stuff already, or Honey Badger, or
totally,
Rollbar, like getting people to swap. That would be the tricky thing.
I think that's the sort of like same idea for like David and Chris. However, as I talked to David, he was like, yeah, we're not trying to like sell people who are already have a solution they're happy with. We're trying to target anybody who's either dissatisfied with their current solution or is a person who's new to the scene who is looking to do this and wants an easy setup, which I think is great because the deal is like the market is only growing. Like Laravel is continuing to rise on, like the number of stars on GitHub, the number of everything's going up. So you get new developers involved all the time who maybe have never done testing before or who have never done this type of testing before and need a really easy to set up environment. And boom, there you go. There's the solution, right? So all the people who are new coming into the ecosystem, they are going to have basically default solution sets provided to them via Frank and Marcel and David and Chris. And so, yeah, I think they'll be just fine, even if people like you and I don't end up switching.
Yeah.
But I do agree. That seemed like a large challenge to me as well. And I don't think, maybe at some point we switch over. Possible. Quite possible. But not yet. So one of the things that Sentry has, which I thought was very interesting, but took us a while to get on board with, mainly just because of the setup, and we didn't really know how exactly we were going to do it, is release tracking. So the way that they do release tracking is you set up a hook into Sentry they have the Sentry API that you can run on Node, or you can actually just do it through call requests, and you essentially say, here is a new deployment that I'm going to be pushing, or here's a new release that I'm building. And you can say, here's the version of the release that you can attach whatever version number you want, and then you can associate commits with that version. You basically give Sentry access to your GitHub repo, and then you say, I am giving you these commits that are going in for this release. Okay. So then in addition to creating the release, you also have a deployment of the release. So you can create the release ahead of time. So like when you deploy to master, when you push to master, you can say, hey, GitHub, and we're using GitHub Actions in this case. We say GitHub Action, go ahead and grab the commits that are in this release and push it over to Sentry and tell them we're making this release. Then what we do is in Envoyer, we grab the SHA of the release that we have. We write it to a .sentry releases file, and then we make an additional call request that says, hey, Sentry, we just deployed that release that we talked about earlier. And Sentry then says, okay, I will activate that release. And then what it does is it will allow you to track any new bugs that are introduced with that release. Or you can say, like, when you see an error in your log, you can say this will be solved in our next release.
Yeah.
So when the next release comes in, it wipes them all out, right? And says, okay, no longer. The other cool thing that it does is it looks at all the commits that you've done since your last release, and it can detect who there is to blame based on who made the commit in the file that caused the error, right? So it will say, oh, interesting, this console command failed at this line, and it looks like Michael Lee was the last one to edit that code, and this is the first time that bug has been introduced. Alert Michael Lee that he has a problem that might be causing some issues over here, right? Which all of that was really, really interesting to me. So we did that. We created that basically that workflow that I talked about there. And it wasn't really possible to do before in Envoyer in our continuous deployment sort of situation, because by the time it gets to Envoyer, it's just a tarball. It's just like a file. There is no Git. Yeah. So you had to kind of do it. You had to figure out those commits, the associating of the commits before you got to Envoyer.
Yeah.
And so now that we have access to GitHub Actions, we can do that. With you guys using something like, what are you using, GitLabs?
Yeah.
That wouldn't be a problem at all, because you guys don't have to wait for GitHub Actions. We had to get approved into the beta program and all that stuff. But with GitLab, you can just do that automatically.
The way that we've always done it is part of our, because we do the Envoyer style, like the Capistrano style deployments where we do the rolling releases. And as part of our deploy process, we will actually do a git head, whatever the command is, and we'll grab the SHA and we put it into a version file. And then in the Sentry config, it gives you, like, one of the configuration options is a release. You can specify the release in the Sentry config. And so we'll just cat that file out and get the contents of it and say, like, this is the release. And that's worked for a long time, and it always does put the commit SHA in there, and we can say, you know, when an issue comes in, that it'll be fixed in the next release. But I get these pop-ups in Sentry when I log into the Sentry dashboard now that say you can set up release tracking. And I get the feeling either something has changed or we've never had it set up quite right, that it seems to think for whatever reason that we're not,
so what
it's got it set up.
So what it's doing for you, and we've done similar things, right? Where we say essentially, like you said, like in your .sentry or in your config/sentry or whatever, you can specify the release version and it will say, yes, like here it is. If you've not told them that you have a release in advance, it will just associate those errors with that particular version that you're tagging it with and just say, here, these are all grouped together. But we got those same errors, and basically that was kind of what prompted us to say, like, okay, well, what is it that we're missing here? And so the things that they say that you're missing is building a release with your commits, right? And that's where you get, I think, the most value, which is kind of where we were at, is we didn't have yet the commits associated with the release, and so they couldn't basically give us any insights into what is the file that is causing the problem and who last changed it. So, I guess those are kind of the other two steps. And I suppose you could either, by deploying a release, you can, when you deploy the release, you can say whether it's in staging or whether it's in production or whether it's whatever. So if you go into Sentry and go into your project and then click releases, it'll show you here are the releases and here's what stage they're in. So we'll have like releases, production, releases, staging, and it'll show you like the different spots that they're at. So you could do that too. Yeah, different environments. Yeah. So it's not that hard to set up, really. It's just really like two extra steps. And the first time you do it, I believe, since we're using the Sentry API, it just associates, if you've never done it before, it just associates the last 20 commits. And says, give us the last 20 commits. Then the next time you do it, it'll look at your current, it'll basically grab the last 20 commits and then say, if any of these, if the last commit that you made was in this history, we'll just do the diff. So we'll just grab like, this one up to the current, and we'll just include those as the list. For us, that works pretty okay. Honestly, for us, it doesn't really matter because we make like one commit to master at a time. It's just a big squash merge that just goes in. Which I don't know if that's actually super beneficial at this point or not, because you kind of miss the particular commit that caused it, but you still can see who it was caused by. So. Yeah.
So you're squashing the individual PRs, right? So if I open a PR, you'd squash all of the commits in my PR when you merge that, as opposed to, because we sometimes, depending on the size of our releases, we might actually create a release branch and then merge everything into that branch and then merge the release branch, because sometimes we have to update dependencies. So for example, we would update our models package in our local environment. We'd push that up to a separate repository, and the test will fail on that merge request that uses that dependency, because we haven't merged and released the model package. So we've got to merge the model package, we've got to tag it, we then have to create the release branch, we have to compose our update, then run the test suite locally, make sure everything is still working, then push it up, and then let CI go about its business. So It's
we do that sometimes.
Process. It's a tedious process. I wish there was a better way of doing it, but because we need to share those models between a few different apps, we're starting to change that a little bit now, and we're starting to sort of, where there's places where we would duplicate, we're starting to put things into like a central API or a B2B, depending on whether that functionality needs to be accessed only internally or if it needs to be accessed by third parties. And then, for example, if we wanted to take payments, then we would, in our members area, we want to take payments from customers directly, but in our CRM, we want to take payments on behalf of customers that call up whatever. So instead of having the payment functionality on both the CRM and the members area, we would just have a thin API client that would handle sending off the request to the B2B, and the B2B would be the central source of truth in terms of how we process that payment and what we do once we've taken the payment. Check to see if the customer should be unsuspended, see if we need to, send them an invoice, whatever.
Totally makes sense. Yeah.
So there's
it's like this first party APIs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like your own internal API. Yeah, I mean, it comes with its own set of challenges, right? You're going to have to like version that API, so in case you ever make a change that's going to be breaking in one and not the other, you end up having the same problem, right? Pretty much. We've been able to get around that for the most part, like breaking changes to those APIs. So yeah, but it's I'm with you though. We've had those same situations where we have like internal packages that we've created that have to be updated in multiple spots, and yeah, I get it.
Yep.
It happens.
Pros and cons, but you weigh them up and you take with the good, the bad, obviously.
Yeah, right. So that's kind of been one of our quality of life improvements recently, I guess you'd say. It was quite a bit of work, honestly, to get it all set up, but we've got it all set up now, and I'm kind of like, okay, great, it's set up. It's like, now what? But I think the thing that you can do in Sentry is that you can actually create rules so that it will automatically assign a issue based on who was the person who created the problem, basically. So no longer do I have to like go in and like triage, okay, whose problem is this? And this person usually works on this repo. I guess it's up to them. Let's have them, And then the nice thing is straight from Sentry, you can actually tag you can create an issue straight from Sentry with like a link to it in a kind of like the stack trace.
The stack trace,
all that stuff. Yep. Yeah, right. Yeah, so those are kind of handy little things.
Nice.
So now all we got to do is get Sentry to sponsor us. What in the world? Right?
One day.
Seriously. One day. Free advertisement for them right there. So what's going on in your life? What's going on over at your place? You were saying that we were trying to figure out, or you were talking about upgrading to Laravel 6. We have not yet. We haven't done that yet. Jason McCreary updated one of our old applications to 5.8. And I was like, should we just put it up to 6? He's like, and this was a couple weeks ago, granted. He's like, I might wait a couple more weeks. He's like, we've got a lot of package developers that are sort of lagging behind on that. He said, so I've had people rolling back to 5.8 just because they've, they did a 6.0 shift, and then it's like they realized that the vendors that they're using don't have a 6.0 compatible release of a package that they need, right? So he's like, I would just wait a couple more weeks and then, whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, we same with us. We typically wait a couple of weeks to allow everyone to update. I think this time around, in terms of packages, has been a bit trickier because we've had a major version bump. So a lot of packages that we depend on were like 5 dot star, and so it worked for 5.5, 5.6, 7, 8, but now they're on 6. A whole bunch of things have broken. So it was a matter of going to figure out, is there a PR to those packages that haven't been tagged yet? Do we need to submit a submit a PR to update the composer.json? Because largely the functionality has remained the same. Nothing's really broken. It's just a matter of adding, pipe caret 6.0 into the composer.json in terms of support for Laravel framework.
Right. Yep.
There were a couple of packages that we were using on that haven't been updated for 2 years and have been marked as, abandoned by the owner. So then it was like, well, do we fork this? And then there was one package we were using, which was just a trait. So we thought, we'll stuff it. We're not going to fork it and then have to maintain it. We'll just pull it in that one file into our package and just use that directly rather than pulling in another dependency. So yeah, we did try the 5.8 to 6.0 probably about 2 weeks after 6 came out, and that was a hold up for us then. But we looked at it again last week and, bit the bullet on in terms of, either bringing things in or submitting merge requests or pull requests for things that needed to be updated. So we have got one of our applications in production now running 6.0. We had all kinds of fun and games with that. I never really got to the bottom of it. Basically, we deployed, all the tests passed, everything was fine. We deployed to production, and then we started having database issues. And I thought, well, the database has been little bit flaky. Like, it's probably just that we'll let it sit. It'll come right in a few minutes. Fast forward like an hour, we were still having issues, and I was tearing my hair out trying to figure out, because I thought nothing should be broken in terms of the application. And because it was not just the application that we'd updated that was having issues, it was, that was our members area, but our CRM was having issues and another one of our applications was having issues. And I thought, well, it can't possibly be the code that we deployed on
right, it must be the database. Yeah,
it's different, the different applications, different servers, all that kind of stuff. So we didn't even look at that for a while. And I thought, just for fun and games, let's roll back the release to the previous one, which was 5.8, and straight away everything was working again and everything stabilized across all of the applications.
Weird.
So I thought,
what's that about?
So I'm not exactly sure what the cause of that was. I think something changed under the hood in the way that Laravel talks to the database, because we could see on the firewall that the database pulled something like 50 gig of traffic across in that time. Now,
Dang.
I don't know what it was. It's not like there was millions of queries being run. It's just, it was too coincidentally timed to have been anything else. We think we've had issues in the past with Laravel and Proxy SQL, and essentially.
So you guys using Proxy SQL?
Well, we were. We're not anymore.
Back to that.
Yeah. So, we had issues in the past with Proxy SQL and Laravel in the way that Laravel handles manages its database connections, and it doesn't really close them off properly.
Oh, weird.
There's an issue on the Proxy SQL repository that basically says, Laravel does this. There's not anything they're going to fix in Proxy SQL, but we bumped on it again. And because Proxy SQL will inspect the database queries and then pass them through, it's possible that it was like rewriting them in some manner that was causing them to misbehave. So
sure,
for the connection that was causing issues, we actually swapped it over to use HA Proxy, which does the same kind of thing. It's HA Proxy is for high availability, but it doesn't do anything with the traffic. It just takes whatever you give it and passes it along to wherever it needs to be, between 1 or 2 or 10 or whatever, how many hosts. And it just passes it along and handles load balancing that way. So that pretty much solved all of the issues that we had. As I said, I never got to the bottom of it. It was weird that it broke it all, but
so are you on 6 now, or are you back in 5.8?
No. So that application is on 6 now, and it's been running fine since we switched over to HA Proxy. Which I mean,
Okay.
our plan was to move to HA Proxy anyway in our new production environments. So that just gave us a little nudge to sort of do it now, rather than waiting, and adding HA Proxy on top of a whole new production environment as well. So the new environment should be a lot of fun. Lots of compute, lots of storage, lots of processing, oomph under the hood, and that'll give us high availability between diverse locations and things like that as well. So looking forward
So
to getting
questions
data
about
spin.
that. So we're using Proxy SQL to provide load balancing.
We were using it kind of. We were using it
because it was my understanding that Proxy SQL doesn't actually provide like failover sort of. It just can.
You have to tell it to failover. I'm pretty like you can give it host groups, and I'm pretty sure it does have down detection. So if a server goes away, it'll
Really okay.
Traffic.
I did not realize that it did. That was sort of the holdup that we had. So we were considering using something like Proxy SQL that would handle that sort of failover, because we had like a couple, I don't know, it was like a month where our database was being really, really flaky. And I mean, it would just cause downtime and everything would just flop. Everything would just fail. And it would be like for an hour, or not probably for an hour, probably like a half hour. And then we'd reboot it and then come back up and everything would be fine until the next day. And it was like, oh my gosh. So this happened for a while. And so we were like, okay, what about this Proxy SQL? But then we looked at it and we're like, I don't think it actually provides failover. It just provides like whatever. It's got some cool stuff that it does, though, because it. Go ahead.
I mean, originally we were using it to prepare to move our database from here in SA to where the new data center is to the new environment. So we were going to replicate our existing database to the new environment, and then to transparently access it, we were going to go through the proxy and just like flick the proxy and say, okay, now go and look at the new database, which we never ended up doing. So. We're better off longer term now with HA Proxy anyway, I think. And then we'll run all of the database servers themselves will run in a multi-master setup anyway.
Okay, so you guys have like, you'll have one master, one slave, and kind of like it'll write. So the slave will just basically replicate the master.
So it's multi-master. So basically you have two masters and a third. You actually have 3 servers in that environment. So you would have a multi-master. So you would write to either of them. And then the third server is responsible for maintaining quorum between them to make sure that the records are all the same. So if one goes away, then you can seamlessly swap to the other one. Whereas in a master or a primary secondary situation, if the primary goes away, the secondary is typically only a read-only node, because you're replicating
right exactly.
Whereas in a primary, you can write to either server, and then the quorum server is responsible for making sure that all the records replicate to all the servers and maintains consistency between them. So that's using.
Is it like eventually consistent?
Yeah, I mean it's we're talking milliseconds. It's not like minutes.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay, gotcha. That makes sense. Okay, interesting. Okay, so what does HA Proxy do then? Does it provide the same things that Proxy SQL was doing, but just not the problems with Laravel?
Because HA Proxy doesn't inspect the traffic, because HA Proxy can be used to proxy HTTP traffic, or we're using it for MySQL. There's a number of things it can be used for. So it's basically just puts a little, but handles the load balancing of traffic.
So it just handles like you just point the DNS towards HA Proxy, and then it just pushes the traffic to one of any number of servers that you have available for it.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that's awesome. Very cool. Okay.
So it'll be good once we get over there, and that'll solve some issues. It's the first real big step towards migrating all of our applications and all of our servers and all of our infrastructure over to this new production environment as well. So once we can replicate gigs of database, then we'll be flying.
Yeah. So I think what we ended up deciding is we were kind of going back and forth. We were like, okay, do we host our own master slave, right? Sort of deal. Do we do this? But then it's like, okay, we still have the same issues for like when we have to handle like change windows. We still have to like reboot in a specific order or make sure that everything stays up in a certain, whatever. and it was just going to be a headache. So we're like, okay, how do we solve this? And then we're like, hey, you know what? Why don't we just do RDS? So I think we're going to do that, and it's going to solve all of our problems. So it's going to handle replication, it's going to handle high availability, it's going to handle all that. And I mean, obviously you pay a price for it, but that's what it is. And we also have now a VPN set up with Amazon, so that we have, it's encrypted from us to them and back, so that we don't, it's a lot. It's just safer.
Yeah. Look,
so that's pretty cool too.
We're fortunate because we have people that are responsible for managing it. If I had to do it myself, I certainly wouldn't be doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have to do it either, but there's guys in my office who do, and they just like, it's a little bit indiscriminate. Like if they just decide to reboot it or whatever, we don't have a high availability situation, right? So there is no secondary server. So like when they take the database server down, if anything is expecting to talk to it, everything just like freaks out. Like, no, MySQL went away, and then you come in the morning to like 10,000 errors in Sentry. Like you get this, you get the spike detection. Exactly. Pretty much. Spike detection was just activated on 10 of your repos or 10 of your projects. What the heck? Awesome. So yeah, that's what we're going to be doing, is moving to RDS, which I'm pretty stoked about actually, because then I can get away from Spatie backup too.
Yeah.
Because I don't have to do that anymore. Because
are you going to RDS with MySQL? Or are you going to switch to Aurora?
Oh, I think MySQL. Yeah. Yeah. I think so. I mean, I to be honest, I'm kind of uneducated about that. I'm not exactly sure what that is when you say Aurora. I'm assuming it's just another MySQL compliant.
Yeah, like Aurora is Amazon's MySQL compliant. It's meant for, running in in that environment. I don't know the specifics. Yeah. I just know that I think it's
to be real honest.
But
oh, okay. Yeah. Our size isn't really that large. I mean, we're talking about internal applications we're running here. So this is like, they're significant in size, but they're not like, typical at scale. I don't know if typical is even the right word, but they're not like really large databases, I guess is the easiest way to say that. So it's not going to be a massive hit as far as that's concerned. So there'll certainly be a little bit more delay, like a tiny bit more delay, just because it's not on the server that's like sitting next to it.
Yeah.
You have like latency, but I don't think it should be a big deal. So.
Yeah. That was a concern for us as well. They're like, people are like, oh, it's going to be 30 milliseconds of latency. I'm like, yeah, 30 milliseconds of latency, but it's going to stay up as opposed to, 8 milliseconds of latency, but it could fall over at any minute.
Right. And so for us, that's just like, okay, we're just going to optimize our queries and or just cache some stuff, which so this is the other thing. Like, so on our intranet page, we had a couple things that were hitting HTTP endpoints that were like blocking the request from loading, right? Because we were doing it on the server side and then pulling it over, and I was like, screw that. We're not doing that anymore, ever. No more HTTP requests. The intranet page needs to load at like now. Like everything needs to load like immediately. So we're warming the cache in the background every 1 minute, like on certain things, and every 5 minutes. So system status, like if there's anything that's down, like if our phones are down or if something's down, like the system status, it's like, hey, by the way, we're aware that phones are down right now, or whatever. That like warms in the cache in the background every 1 minute, or else it can be an API request out all the time. So
yeah, I did a bit of optimization the other day. We had a query that as our customer base has grown, it would basically look, we've got 121 points of interconnect around the country, and each one of those has got X hundred or X thousand customers on it, and then each one of those customers has a session that reports whether they're online or not. And that makes this really easy. You can do point of interconnect : with services dot current session. Easy. But when you've got all of them and you've got thousands of them and you're trying to load this all into an Eloquent collection, what happens?
Yeah.
Nothing good. You get that memory allocation exhausted when trying to allocate X bytes. So I went through it, and because we were loading all of the models and all of that into memory, and we never used any of it, so I went into the Jonathan Rennick handbook, and I went in and replaced all of those widths with width counts, and then just returned the numbers. And that page went from, timing out after 30 seconds and exploding in a ball of overused memory to loading in less than, I think it was about 2 seconds. Like, it's still a lot of data and a lot of queries that it has to run, but we're, down to 2 seconds. The page is basically instant for what it's doing. So, Yeah, it's nice. And those are the kind of things that you can kind of predict, knowing that loading all of those models is going to be nasty. But when you're writing it in a development environment where you don't have thousands of records, or you're not anticipating some level of growth, or you think, it looks efficient, you look at debug bar and you go, yeah, that looks fine. It's only running 3 queries and that's fine. But yeah, as Jonathan pointed out in his talk at Laracon US this year, that the number of queries is not the only metric, and the speed of those queries is not the only metric. You also have to consider memory utilization and how many models you're actually hydrating. So I think I know that he mentioned that he'd written that plugin for debug bar to show the hydrated models.
Yeah.
I don't know if that ever got merged in. It'd be good to follow up.
I don't know either. Yeah. That's a good point.
Even when he hears this episode, maybe he can let us know, or we can dig into it ourselves and figure it out. But it'd be good to have that, because that's a really it's a really useful thing to have, to know, is that number increasing the more records I'm returning to the page? And if it is, being more mindful of whether or not that's a smart thing to be doing in terms of scalability.
Totally. There's this girl I've been following recently, Julia Evans. She's a SQL nerd, and she's pretty amazing and very, very, very smart. And she's been teaching me a lot about really interesting, window functions in SQL, subqueries, a lot of the same stuff that Jonathan Renick is talking about. But she's pretty smart chick, and has a really good way of explaining this stuff. One of the interesting ones that she posted recently was a diagram for how SQL queries actually run. So you always write a SQL query with select first, but select is actually like the 5th thing that's called. So when you have this chart in your head, it actually makes sense for why you can't do a why you can't do a where after a group by or whatever. It's because group by is done after where. So it's just interesting. But she's a really good person to follow. It's at B0RK on Twitter. Bork. Yeah, I don't know what that's about, but she makes some pretty cool comics. So check that out. The other thing that I wanted to talk about today, which I thought was sort of interesting maybe, we've talked about job middlewares, which is something new that's landed in Laravel 6. And we've talked about it on the Laravel News podcast, and we're like, what could we use that for? Where would that be interesting at? So I think I might have an example, but it might also deal with rate limiting your queued jobs. So I have situations where I think it might be both. I think they're both interesting, but the one situation that I came into where we were talking about some way that this would be useful was in this context. So we have claimants that we reach out to on occasion and say, hey, you set up a reminder to, make your payment at this time of the month. Here's your text message or your email reminder to let you know, hey, by the way, you asked for that, right? We have to be very, very careful in the number of times we text message or the number of times we email somebody, though. And we have to be very cognizant and have record of the exact messages that we sent them in the case that there's some compliance or regulator that comes and says, hey, you were, somebody said that you texted them 100 times in an afternoon, right? We need to be able to say, no, we didn't actually. Here's what we actually did. So we have to keep track of all that. So, there's a lot of laws related to how often you can contact people and if you have their consent or not and whatever. And so one of the things that we wanted to put in place is essentially a middleware, if you will, that will check to see how many contacts we've had within a period of time and essentially rate limit our contact of that person. So that if there's a person in our office who is trying to contact them via text message, we can say, nope, that person has already been messaged today. You cannot contact them again. Or if they've been contacted twice, we say it doesn't really matter what the message is. You can call them, maybe, or email them, but you cannot text message them. Text message is really the big sensitive one. It's very protected. So So what we were looking at is how we could use those job middlewares to basically attach those onto any job that's going to send a text message and say, look at our list of notifications that we've had with this person in the last 24 hours and determine if you're allowed to send a text message to that person or not. And then if not, respond with the appropriate status code and message to the person who is requesting that text message to go out. So that was the first use that I've found in our current applications that would be really handy to attach to these jobs. And the nice thing is, if we have multiple jobs that are responsible for text messaging this person, all we have to do is write the middleware once and then attach it to any of those jobs that are doing the text messaging, right? So just, here's 5 jobs that send 5 different types of text messages. Some of them maybe even be automated, some of them may be manual, whatever. But you just attach that one middleware that says, look at their notifications for this file number and with the notification type being SMS. And if there's been more than 2 within the last 24 hours, rate limit and say, no, you cannot. You can't do that. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a good use for it. I think Sparsio or Freik the other day was tweeting about that. They've built a rate limiting thing package. I think it's specifically for Redis. I don't know that it's necessarily jobs, but the underlying concept and the functionality is the same. So,
what was it specifically? Do you remember?
Not off the top of my head.
Because there's also this idea of rate limiting jobs in PHP now if you're using Redis. So they have specifying max jobs attempts or timeout values. So you can specify the maximum number of times a job may be attempted with tries. We've probably all done that before where we say, okay, you have a max of 3 tries, right? And you can either specify that on the worker that's actually doing it, or you can specify it on the job itself by saying tries as a public property. You also have time-based attempts, which is interesting. So it basically just says you can try as many times as you want until 5 minutes has elapsed, and then you should stop trying. So that's an interesting option. You have timeout, which basically says work for 30 seconds and then fail. But then you also have these rate limits, but it only works really with Redis. So you can throttle your queued jobs by time or by concurrency. So you can say only this many so allow 10 every 60 seconds. So this is great for if you're interacting with an API. So we have, for example, one application where we are querying Outlook's, like Office 365's Outlook API, and there is a rate limit on that. And so we can specify you can only have this many this often, which is really handy because it's very clear in the documentation how many there are. But without something like this throttle method, it's nearly impossible to try and figure out how you stop jobs from running. You know what I mean? So this makes it really nice. And it's a little bit odd to set up, but it is possible. It's all in the documentation.
It was pretty interesting. It is job middleware, so that's kind of handy. See if I can get it up on the stream. It's this Laravel rate limited job middleware is the package from Sparsy. So it is a middleware that can rate limit jobs, not just on the Redis. So the default allows you only 5 jobs to be executed per second, and any jobs that are not allowed will be released for 5 seconds. But it doesn't look necessarily like there's conditional logic. Oh, you can customize the behavior where you provide a middleware method on the job, and you can say it's a rate limited middleware, allow every... So I guess you could probably do something in there to configure what actually triggers, doing the SMS lookup and things like that.
Sure. That's cool. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes.
Cool. So yeah, that was like one of the first things that I found in that job middleware. Since we've talked about it, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I should definitely do that.
Yeah,
I should definitely do that. Okay, what else we got? Well,
we can touch on then ping me if we want.
Let's do that. Yeah. So basically, Michael has been solo developing this thing since we started, pretty much, with the exception of the landing page, which was kind of a evening thing. I've been working on a side project, which you've maybe seen on Twitter if you follow me. It's called go.spreadtruth.com. So Spread Truth is the nonprofit that I work for on Fridays, which is awesome. And they've got this platform that I helped rebuild for them last year. But they used some illustrations from a guy who used to work at Spread Truth. His name is Phil Borst. He's super, super talented animator, actually. He made some illustrations probably 3 or 4 years ago for a Christmas card for Spread Truth. And so we decided to resurrect them and put them on the main site. So I've been doing that, as well as a lot of other changes that have been required to get their registration launched for this year. And so that was launched October 1st. So we're kind of going through last round little changes here before I'm done with that. And then it's full time on Then Ping Me.
Nice.
Kind of as a sidebar here, I used Sizzy. Is it Sizzy or Sizzy?
Yeah.
I think it's Sizzy.
Sizzy
For the first time. And oh my word, was it amazing. It was so nice, because especially when you're having to do like a responsive design from scratch, like you would be in Tailwind, right? And this is the same thing that happened with when I was designing our landing page, Michael, for Then Ping Me, is you feel like you have to you're constantly switching from small to large, because one thing that you do, changing one thing kind of affects all the other sizes, right? So you have to kind of be able to see all of them at once, and using Chrome DevTools is not an ideal way to do this. So Sizzy makes it so simple, and on Adam Wathan's live streams, he has his extra small, medium, large, extra large setup breakpoints on Sizzy. And so I set that up in mine as well, and it made an amazing amount of difference. So this is the first website that I can say with quite a bit of confidence that looks good in every mode, from the 5S all the way up to an iPad, all the way up to a desktop, in both portrait and landscape. Nice. Looks sane in all of them. There's no breaks that I found as I was going between them. So that was pretty incredible. That was a great experience. And it's a decently complex. I mean, if you look at it, you'd say, oh, it's not that complex. But there's Z indexes, there's negative margins, there's, crazy background images swapping out in different places. And the great thing was I only had to write maybe 2 little blocks of custom CSS to get it to work. Everything else was in Tailwind. I didn't know that Z indexes were in Tailwind, and they worked. I couldn't believe that. The Z indexes based on screen breaks, responsive sizes works perfectly. I could not believe it. It was such an amazing experience. And so it was really, really cool to be able to design that in Sizzy and Tailwind, and it just felt like magic. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah. I got to give it a go at some stage. I mean, our main sort of CRM application at the moment, we only really care about desktop users, so it's pretty easy. But in terms of any of the freelance stuff that I'm doing, and certainly for our members area, which we're planning on revamping later on in this year, early in the new year, making sure that it works across all of the viewports will be key for us. So we're using Bulma at the moment. We're going to switch to Tailwind, but we're using a really, I think version 0.3 or 0.4 of Bulma, and upgrading it to anything recent is going to be a real pain. So we may as well just start over from scratch.
Totally. So and it shouldn't take that long, honestly.
No, I mean, we build the skeleton and then we develop a card and some table, classes and things like that.
Sure.
It's pretty much good to go. So
yeah, so I was messing with that too. So so I'm still struggling a little bit with that, extracting components, because I had a component that I extracted and it worked fine for the most part, unless I wanted to change padding or something. So it's you have to kind of figure out what are the pieces that you want to be a part of the button and what are the pieces that you don't. So you kind of have to say, all right, so I'm only interested maybe in the coloring. So I want the background color, the text, and then hover color and active state and all those to be defined on the button maybe, right? But then you kind of leave margin and padding up to the person who's actually going to be consuming it and where it's going to be in the particular layout, right? But then I also have this issue of okay, well, what if I need the text to be larger? Do I define that in the button, or do I let the surrounding context define that as well? So you just have these sort of excuse me, you have these sort of trade-offs, right? Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. Shake your head. I've still got this cough. It's ridiculous. So I'm working through that. I'm working through
Yeah.
which pieces do I define on there, which pieces do I let the context define. But even at that, it was still, like I said, really good experience.
Yeah.
But something I'm working through. Yeah.
Would it be good because Steve and Adam put up their Tailwind UI landing
Yeah,
page the other
that's looking
day.
really good.
So that I said to I messaged Adam. I'm like, damn son, this page, and all it is a title, a form, and this scrolling thing, but it just looks clean. All of the
Yeah, it does.
designs, like there is dozens and dozens of designs of different fake UIs that they've built, and I'm looking forward to it, especially because a lot of their stuff is like black and white in terms
Yeah.
of primary color is black and things like that, which suits us fine because our colors are red and black, and it's very, very likely that we're going to use black for our primary buttons because you don't really want to use red because it has negative connotations most of the time,
Yeah.
for better or worse. But yeah, I'm looking forward. I said when Steve tweeted it, I said, "Can I just give you money now and you figure it out later when you give it to me?" So
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah,
check it
that's
out.
funny.
That's at tailwindui.com.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that as well. It's been a cool project to see Steve tweet out this stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I want to use that right now. And honestly, even for the most part, I almost feel like I could look at the designs and like implement them myself with Tailwind. I mean, for the most part, like Steve's designs is what's really that's what's killer about it. Like you get that for free pretty much. It's just like,
Yeah.
and then on top of that, they give you the they give you all the responsive code that just makes it
HTML, yeah.
work. Yeah, it's
And
quite
watching
incredible.
Adam build, he did the pricing table the other day on a live stream, which I went through and watched. And it was so comforting to see that him go, you know what, this design that we've done for mobile isn't going to just become desktop. So he just hid the whole mobile thing on the desktop view and then just duplicated the whole lot for desktop. So that made me feel a lot better about myself because I've done that before. And I thought,
Oh yeah,
this feels dirty, but it also feels like it's the only way. And apparently it is. So
yeah, sometimes it is. Like I've found the same thing. I've found a lot of freedom in that. Like, and I think Adam was pretty much the first person to essentially give me permission to do that. Like as I watched him, it was like, yeah, I'm just gonna hide this. It's like, oh yeah, that's an option. That can totally make sense. Because sometimes you literally wrestle with the same code for like an hour trying to get it to fit so perfectly, and it's like it literally does not matter.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't matter. It's not. I mean, depending, of course, on how many DOM nodes you're actually going to be loading and hiding, right?
Yeah.
But for the vast majority of the time, it just does not make that big of a difference to hide the whole thing and just show a different version. Yeah, it's cheap. It's cheap.
it is. It's cheap.
Right?
It's HTML. It all gets compressed and gzipped and whatever else over the wire anyway. So
yeah, exactly. Yep. Cool. Well, that's all I got for today, man. How's Laracon AU going? It looks like let me just say, I looked at it the other day. The site just looks incredible. I mean, looks amazing. And you got a pretty solid lineup this year. Looks like you got quite a few great speakers. So that's going to be awesome.
We made a conscious effort this year to... I knew very early on that we weren't going to get Adam and Steve and Taylor and Matt back. It's a huge journey for those guys, especially they've got families and stuff. And Taylor did a bit of travel himself this year. They went over to Europe and whatever. So I knew fairly early on that we weren't going to have those guys come out again this year, unfortunately. But we made a very conscious effort on the back of, or conscious decision on the back of that to make sure that we balanced the speaker lineup with some known people, the people that sell the tickets kind of thing. And then to balance that out with local speakers. I think we've got 5 or 6 first-time speakers, which I'm excited about. That bringing some new perspectives into into Laracon, especially for us, because it's harder to get people to come from overseas.
Yeah,
it's more expensive
for sure.
for us to bring them over here. It's a lot of travel. To get some new voices and some new perspectives is really important, I think, in terms of keeping the audience invigorated, because you don't want to have not that I don't like hearing from the same Adams and Taylors and Matts and all that kind of stuff. I love hearing their talks because they've always got something interesting to say, but keeping the audiences invigorated and making them come back and actually wanting to see the talks, because I know you and I have discussed this, and a lot of people say that the conference is less about the talks and more about the experiences that you have with the attendees.
For sure.
So I want to balance that, as I said, new ideas, new voices, new people and to make people actually want to see the talks as well as hanging out with their friends and making the personal connections. So I think sort of being forced into it a little bit, but being able to have that luxury and being able to put on sort of 5 or 6 first time speakers is really exciting for my perspective as an organizer. Everything's
absolutely
coming up really quickly now. We sent off all the artwork to have the t-shirts done, to have all of our banners and light
the branding looks amazing. It looks amazing.
So Steve did the website for us again this year, so thanks to Steve Shoga, and Noemi Olvera from Titan did our artwork for the logo that we're going to put on the t-shirts and the badges and stuff. So that's all been sent off. I think we've got nine early bird tickets left. We're closing that off in about 9 hours, if my maths is right. Maybe my maths isn't right. 10 hours. In 10 hours, we're going to close off the early bird. And then, I think we're about 9 tickets away from capacity anyway. So, we've sold the tickets well, even with the, lack of superstar speakers this year. So I'm excited. We've got the shorter format. We've got some different topics to what we've seen at previous Laracons, which I think is going to be really good. And we're doing a little bit of different stuff this year in terms of presentation format. We're going to do some may turn out to be a disaster, but when you organize a conference, you can pretty much try anything once, I guess. So we're going to do some live
lightning talks.
Not lightning talks. We're going to do some lightning talks. It may be just like myself, Freek, and I just make some stuff up on the spot at this point, but we're going to do some live trivia. So I found
that'll be cool.
Yeah, Wes Boss and Scott Talinsky were talking about this like months ago on the Syntax podcast, a product that they used at a conference that they attended to do a thing. So we're going to use that as a means to give away some prizes as well. So having the 30-minute time slots gives us a bit of wiggle room in terms of sprinkling some extra stuff in that isn't conference talks, but that kind of keeps the audience engaged. So looking forward to it. I'm also looking forward to having a few days away from work. Eli and I are flying over on the Monday for the conference, which is on the Thursday, and we're going to hang out in Sydney for a couple of days and go and check out the zoo and the aquarium and things like that, just to unwind a little bit and recharge the batteries before
absolutely
getting slammed with everything.
Yeah, for sure. Eli's getting so big, man. He's looking great. He's looking so stinking cute.
We took him to see the pediatrician yesterday and everything's going well. He's at like 9.2 kilos, which I swear he doesn't, like, he just grazes all day. He's always eating. There's always food in his hand, always chewing on something, and he just doesn't put on any weight. And I wish I had his metabolism. I don't know where he gets it from. But my cousin, whose son is, I think, 6 or 7 weeks old, she came over to weigh him last night, and he's like more than half of Eli's weight already.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
So he was 3 weeks early as well, but because he was big, whereas Eli came flying into this world.
So, that's awesome. Yeah. And you guys got family pictures the other day. Those looked awesome too.
Yeah, we had the photos done last week. And we went and picked out our 10 favorites yesterday. So in the next couple of weeks, the photographer will edit them all up, and we'll get a nice.
Hopefully, we can see them on Twitter.
I'm sure Ree will share them once we get our hands on the digitals.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, cool. All right, dude. Thanks for being patient with me the other night. Everybody, I fell asleep again last night. We were supposed to do this show yesterday.
Yeah.
And I'm in bed, and I always do this. I was like, I'm going to take a quick nap, and then I'm going to get up, because yesterday was just a beast of a day. I was so tired. And so I was like, I'm going to get up real quick. Or, I'm going to take a nap real quick, and then I'll get up. And so then it was like 11:30. We usually record at 10:30.
Yeah.
My wife's like, Jake, you're supposed to do that podcast. I'm like, oh, crap. So I text Michael. He's like, I get the messages on Telegram like, hey, where are you? Rory, I'm so Rory. Good gift. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, thanks for being patient. This is episode 63. Thanks for tuning in. If you liked the show, feel free to rate us up in your podcatcher of choice or tell your friends about us. Hit us up on Twitter with any questions at Michael Dorinda, at Jake Bennett, or at North South Audio. And you can find show notes for this episode at northmeetsouth.audio/63. Yeah. That's it, everyone. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. We'll see you in 2 weeks. And Michael, you can shut off your live stream after this, because on the last Level News podcast, he was streaming an empty office for about an hour after the fact, I think. So,
hey, in case anything weird happens, I don't think anything will, but in case anything does, we're moving this podcast to transistor.fm in the next couple of weeks. So the next time an episode drops from us after this one will be on Justin Jackson and John Buddha's homegrown podcasting service. So looking forward to finally getting a chance to support those guys and the great work they're doing. So check out their podcast as well. They're at sas.transistor.fm, I think, is their podcast. So definitely check those guys out. They've been chronicling their journey of building that platform since they started it at the beginning of 2018. And it's interesting to follow along, not only as they come across and solve challenges in building the business, but also just hearing them develop as podcast hosts and building the rapport with the audience. And
for sure,
every week I look forward to hearing about Junta.
I haven't been listening, so I don't know what that means, but I'm sure those of you who are listeners will get the reference. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
See you. Bye.
Peace.